The Claiming of Grimmauld Place by bixgirl1. Chapter 5, Part 3. Commitments Rendered. Harry stepped out of the flue and quickly removed his robes, tossing them over the arm of the sofa. He kicked off his shoes and began to remove his t-shirt, only to pause when the low sound of laughter reached his ears. Curious, he levitated his shoes over to the small shelf the house had allowed him to install near the front door and padded on socked feet out to the garden. Draco? Draco looked up from where he was sitting with Pansy, Blaze, Greg, and Luna. "You're late," he said flatly. "You're, early?" Harry pointed out, smiling in confusion. He went over to the blanket they'd spread out on the grass and nodded to everyone as he lowered himself down next to Draco in a cross-legged position. He leaned over and kissed him. Draco flushed and Harry smiled. "I thought you were working until late." I'm coming down with something. They sent me home because I was sneezing, and that's not the most dignified front to present to customers of a certain quality. I've already taken some pepper up," he added when Harry reached up to feel his forehead. He didn't move away from the touch, though, and that felt somehow significant. Harry's stomach fluttered pleasantly, and he leaned in to brush another kiss against the corner of Draco's mouth. "Please stop," Pansy said. "Let them," Greg said quietly, glancing up for a second. In his hands was a small metallic box with a series of strings and holes. He fiddled with it for a moment, tapping it in various places with his wand until it started emitting a sweet melody of high, hollow notes. He set it in the middle of the blanket, next to a basket. "Draco's happy." Harry looked at Greg for a second, smiling his thanks at the unexpected warmth from the domesticity of the moment. Draco and Harry, surrounded by friends in their garden, hit Harry with the force of a bludgeon to the temple. They were allowed to be close like this, and Harry suddenly realized why he never minded anymore that Draco's friends came over so often. Because despite what Draco claimed, they were a couple, in front of the people who loved them. Draco was sitting beside him like a confirmed boyfriend, and like Greg had said, Draco seemed happy. "I am not," Draco said, scowling. Harry snorted, and Draco cast him a mischievous smile, then straightened snootily. A rather amazing feat for someone lazing back on his hands, wearing grey joggers and a t-shirt. "It's simply pointless to argue with Potter when he wants to do something." "Hypocrite," Harry said, chuckling. "What are you guys doing out here?" "Luna came over to let Frances out and found me here, so she retrieved Pansy, who called Blaze and Greg, because they somehow decided that this," Draco said, gesturing to the picnic in a bored way, "would be a good idea if I wasn't working. I suggested a Quidditch game, but only Blaze was interested, and none of the good clubs are open yet." "You would have gone to a club without me?" Harry asked, feigning hurt. He thought it was feigned, anyhow. "And have you grind on me in public?" Draco asked archly. Harry swallowed, muting his eyes, and Draco's cheeks darkened fetchingly. "Really? Stop," Pansy said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be that way," Luna told her sweetly. "You love grinding in public." Pansy flushed, but looked at Luna from under her lashes, a startlingly sweet look crossing her face before she remembered to modify it into something bland. They snorted and uncupped his bottle of pumpkin juice. "She does that?" "She's lovely in that way, isn't she?" Luna said, reaching out to drag her fingertips over Frank, who was lounging beside her. He closed his eyes in apparent bliss. "In a lot of ways, actually." "Okay, I think everyone should stop," Harry said empathetically. Draco nudged him with his shoulder and grinned. Harry helped himself to one of the sandwiches in the basket and a bottle of juice. Took a couple of bites and then said, "This is odd." "What?" Greg asked. He stretched his leg out in front of him and mimicked Draco's position, settling back on his hands and tilting his face towards the sun. "The food? Oh, I thought it was good." No, it is," Harry said, smiling at him, and Greg grinned, open and warm. "I just meant this. All of us." He sat, feeling ridiculous. Harry thought to try to explain further, but to his surprise, Pansy nodded before he could. Picnics, life, adulthood, she said, sounding an exacerbatedly fond look at Luna, who smiled complacently. You and Draco. Hey, Harry and Draco said together, then snorted in unison. Blaise exaggerated a grimace. It's important to enjoy the little thing, Luna said. Frank blinked up at her as though he agreed, then turned his head to search for flowers from the fingers stroking his jaw. It's important to understand the sorts of things that really matter. Those are the little things, Draco said with a dubious eyebrow raise. He leaned into Harry a little, and Harry's breath caught in his chest. Pulse throbbing in his throat, he casually slipped an arm around Draco's waist, exciting quietly when Draco didn't move. They're all the little things, Luna said. After all, little things make up the big things, don't they? A wrinkle appeared between Draco's eyes. What about the things that are big on their own? He asked, sounding merely curious to her answer. Even those, Luna said. Like you and Harry. Harry felt his cheeks warm as 4 sets of eyes suddenly landed on him. He waited for Draco to object, to say that it was nothing that would last, but when he simply nodded, Harry did too, something hot and possessive and good flaring in his chest, a sense of home he'd not allowed himself to feel. He wondered idly if it was the house, the company, or just Draco. Silence fell but for the strains of Greg's music box, which switched into a more upbeat number after a few moments. Harry polished off his sandwich, then gestured to Paul, who was peeking out of his gnome hole. Ever since Paul's mishap, both Harry and Draco had made an effort to spend time with him. He pulled his wand from his jeans and summoned the every-flavor beans. Paul, come here. Paul looked at him suspiciously, squat little body going tense with longing when the jar of beans flew into Harry's hand. Pansy was gaping, and even Greg looked a little shocked at Paul's presence, but everyone else looked back and forth between Paul and Harry expectantly. Want to watch me be really adult? Harry asked with a grin, opening the jar. Pulled out a small handful of beans. Paul! Paul, listen to for the fracker! Paul peeped out of sheer contrariness. Give me beans! Don't pretend like you don't like this, Harry said matter-of-factly. To make a point, he tossed a bean into the air and caught it in his mouth, managing not to wince. It was artichoke. Paul winked. Harry grinned at him. You can come hang out with us. Draco might even let you sit on Frank if you're nice. I will not, Draco said affronted before pausing. Unless Francis doesn't mind. He's a tortoise, Blaise said under his breath. Harry controlled a snicker as Paul slid forward. Paul, that just bean and fracas gives me creature, Paul decided aloud. I never thought I'd admire a gnome, Pansy said, then shrugged lightly when Harry huffed at her. What? He's not the cleanest little beast, but he goes after what he wants. She sat with a peal of laughter. Her eyes glittered at him, and she had the same sly curl to her lip that he'd seen so often on Draco's face. Harry thought they must give lessons on it in the Slytherin house. I've always had pets take after their owners, so... Fit on, not keep, Harry said to Paul with dignity, ignoring Pansy and the way Draco pretended his laugh was a cough. Come on, try it from the wall. When Paul continued to stand there and scowl at him, not budging, Harry pulled his ace. Attention. Go on. Everyone wants to see what you can do. Paul stared at him for a second, then turned in a flash and scampered for the high stone wall, climbing up it with a surprising agility. At the top he turned back and around and flashed all his sharp, crooked, dirty teeth in a grin that was as disturbing as it was charming. Paul to jump, he announced. Yeah, okay, on the count of 3. Harry weighed the bean between his thumb and forefinger, eyeing the distance and winding his arm back, then counted down. Paul jumping, opening his mouth wide, Harry threw the bean. I thought, Draco panted, turning on him and pulling him into a kiss as soon as Blaise disappeared through the flue. that they've decided to move in. Just need one visiting housemate, Harry said, kissing him back. And you're the one that invited them. Not Weasley and Granger. They crashed, Draco said into his mouth, hands already peeling Harry's shirt up and off. I sent my Patronus while you were in the loo, Harry corrected, mouthing along the bend of Draco's neck. Draco shuddered, canting his hips into Harry. They worked their way up the stairs and to Harry's room, wrapped around each other, stumbling every few steps. You didn't have to turn it into a party, Draco said, complaint as clear in his voice as arousal. His fingers popped the button on Harry's jeans, then dragged the zipper down with teasing slowness. Don't you know by now that sort of thing makes people want to stay? As long as you do, Harry said, diving in for another kiss. He wriggled out of his jeans and kicked them aside, then slipped a finger under the elastic of Draco's waistband, tugging on his joggers gently. Draco laughed and shoved Harry, sending him toppling onto the mattress, then climbing atop of him, legs stretched out over Harry's, hands flat on either side of Harry's head. He widened his legs into a straddle, pressing his knees into the bed as he thrust it lightly against Harry, then harder. Just, fuck yeah, Harry gulped. Stay, he said. Where do you think I'm going? Draco asked, voice going low and smoky. Gave his hips another pump. Out to watch your gnome catch beans in his mouth while performing a triple somersault in pursuit of riding my tortoise. They both paused. I never imagined a sentence like that could exist, Harry said, dragging Draco's head down for another kiss. You've always had the ability to make me say things I regret. Draco sat with a breathless laugh, resuming the slow grind of his hips into Harry's. You had fun today, Harry said. He wiggled his fingers under Draco's waistband again, plucking at it and sliding them down further until the crevice of his arse was bared. Draco grinned, his chest rising and falling against Harry's. Never said I didn't. You'll miss me if you leave, Harry murmured, catching Draco's earlobe in his teeth. He released it, licking over where he'd bitten, then scribbed his teeth down Draco's jaw over his throat. He dipped his tongue into the hollow of it and felt the vibration of Draco's low moan as the rocking of his hips sped up for a moment. Never said I wouldn't, he panted. Hooking a tight arm around Draco's back, Harry rolled him so he was on top, nipping at the flexing muscles of Draco's shoulders before hunching over to work his way lower down Draco's chest, sucking one tight nipple between his teeth and flicking his tongue over it. He glanced up. Draco stared down at him, eyes hot and needy. So, stay then, Harry said. Butter? Draco gasped out when Harry applied his teeth again. Harry sucked in a sharp breath as Draco skimmed against his own skin through the thin layers of fabric covering them. Draco's hands came up to rest against Harry's biceps. His fingers curled. Maybe I won't even get the spot, he said raggedly. Harry stilled and looked up. Draco's eyes were dark, the grey a thin ring around pupils blown wide. He touched Harry's jaw with a persistent finger, and Harry lifted to settle fully over Draco again, sliding their bodies together. Draco's hand combed the back of his neck, and he pulled Harry down into an eager kiss, his tongue rubbing against Harry's, one leg coming up to wrap around Harry's hip. Harry wrenched his mouth away, sucking in a deep breath. What do you mean? Draco bared his throat in an arch, the heel resting on Harry's tailbone, pressing them closer together. Harry's toes flexed. Instinctively, he thrust against Draco again and again when Draco groaned. He pried his head back up on the pillow, cheeks flushed blotchy, all of his fine, perfect hair a gorgeous mess from Harry's hand having been sunk in it. Merlin, like that? Draco, Harry said, even as he obeyed, canting his hips forward and dragging them back. What do you mean? You'd be okay with not getting the sport, because... It was impressive, the way Draco managed to look aggravated and unbearably aroused at the same time. One of Draco's hands slid down, stroking urgently over the muscles of Harry's back, which twitched in response. Slid his fingers into the back of Harry's pants, the way Harry had done with Draco's joggers, and shoved them down around his hips. "You really feel like talking now?" Draco asked, protest clear in his tone. But his eyes had that crinkle next to them, and Harry pressed another fervent kiss to his mouth, reaching between them to massage Draco's dick, straining against his joggers. "Just fuck," Harry panted into his ears as Draco squirmed under him. "If you're thinking about, I have a job," Draco said. He sucked at Harry's neck with light kisses. "Two. I get my inheritance in a year, and we. Harry agreed. He lifted up again minutely when Draco nudged his hips away and moaned when Draco shoved his joggers down to his thighs with one quick, sure hand. And then they were skin to skin, and Harry was quite ready to be done talking until... "It doesn't have to be more than a hobby anyway," Draco said before reaching towards for him for another kiss. Harry paused, frowning against Draco's mouth. "What? Draco, you're going to be potions master," he said. Draco hummed noncommittently, and Harry frowned deep. Though he knew he should feel like celebrating, Draco's sudden change of heart made him uneasy. He wanted to wait to find the right time to broach the subject of Hogwarts, but... "I was going to tell you, but everyone was here when I got home. All you have to do is apply to Hogwarts. I talked to McGonagall." "Okay," Draco said, then blinked, and stilled under him. The heat in his face bled away, transforming into a look of bewildered skepticism. "About what?" "About you," Harry said. He drew back further when Draco stared at him. I just told her that you needed some additional training. Slughorn wants to retire. Frankly, she wants him to. She said she'd interview for the position. They have some portraits that can train you for your certification." "You did what?" The incredulous whisper issuing from Draco's barely moving lips. A far cry from the relief Harry thought he would see. Froze Harry in place. He skimmed the pad of his thumb over Draco's exposed collarbone in question. Draco flinched, pushing Harry off of him and sitting up. His bare back was pale and tense in the moonlight coming through the window. He stood, pulling up his joggers around his hips with short, jerky movements. I... Harry sat up too, his erection wilting rapidly at the banked fury on Draco's face. "It's not guaranteed or anything, it's just an interview," he said. "Why are you..." "What are you going to tell me next?" Draco said with a sneer, suddenly more Malfoy than Harry had seen since before he'd moved in. Before the war, even. "You brought back Malfoy Manor for me too?" Swallowing, Harry stood. Slipped his pants back up and walked cautiously over to Draco, who stared at him coldly, as though smelling something foul. He turned and stalked over to the window just before Harry reached him, shoulders rigid and hands fisted at his side. "I didn't," Harry said. "Of course not." "I'll bet you thought about it," Draco said flatly. Harry fell silent, and Draco barked an angry laugh. "Do you never listen, Potter?" Draco asked, scathing as he carded a hand through his hair. He turned around to face Harry, a muscle in his cheek jumping. Harry thought about having kissed that spot only moments before. I don't know what I did wrong," he said finally. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't... You have to get the job on your own, you know." Draco's lip curled. "Of course you did nothing wrong. You're the chosen one. What does it matter that your Death Eater of a boyfriend made a specific request of you? With my history, I obviously don't have the right to make decisions for myself, do I?" Flummoxed, Harry stared at him. He sucked his upper lip between his teeth for a moment, mind caught on the unthinking way Draco had referred to himself as Harry's boyfriend. It felt like progress, or would if not for the look on Draco's face. "Since when are we allowed to call each other that?" Harry asked. "You've made it seem like..."
You make me reconsider things, Draco snapped. Until now, when you've just proven you don't think me capable of doing anything on my own. That's not what I think, Harry said. Then what do you think?
Draco asked with a cutting twist to his mouth.
That because we're shagging, you're allowed to ignore the fact that I told you I was going to do this on my own, without your help.
He smiled meanly.
You can be everyone else's savior, Potter, but you won't be mine. I thought I made that clear.
No, you did, Harry said helplessly. He shook his head, promptly frustrated, and approached Draco, who was holding himself so taut he trembled visibly. His already pale face looked washed of all colour.
I wasn't saving you. You don't even want to go. It doesn't matter whether I wanted to go. What I did want, what I made clear I wanted, was for you to never fucking save me again,
Draco said. He moved to shove past Harry, and Harry caught his elbow, holding him in place.
I'm not your fucking pet. Don't go. Let's talk about this,
Harry said, low and urgent. Draco pulled at his arm, tight in Harry's clasp.
Perhaps we could have done that before you charged off to be the hero again. Just become a bloody aura, Harry. You're obviously addicted to the thrill.
I'm not, Harry said, tugging him closer. Their faces were close. He could feel Draco's breath hot against his cheek.
I just wanted to help,
Draco said through his teeth.
I know. I've needed so much help from you, haven't I? It's almost as if you miss it. Why won't you let me? I could,
Harry said, trying to control the waves of indignation threatening to overwhelm him.
I could help you if only you ask.
Draco signed a dismissive gaze to the hand set on his arm.
Tell you that I need you? Go on, keep showing me how little you know me. I wanted to keep you with me, Harry burst out. I was doing it for me, can't you understand that? A multitude of ways, I gather,
Draco said, brow arching cruelly as he glanced down the length of Harry's body. He sniffed.
Well, at least we both wanted that. Stop it, Harry said. This wasn't supposed to have gone this way.
Draco looked at him for a moment, then started laughing. Nothing like the soft, warm laughter Harry had come to know over breakfast, or the affectionate, heated laughter that made his stomach flutter as they rolled around in bed. It was a sharp sound, like glass breaking in his throat. Then his laughter died as quickly as it started, and his expression shifted into one of disdain.
No, I've no doubt of that, Draco said. Let go of me.
Harry dropped his hand.
I wanted to keep you here. Give you an opportunity to stay if you wanted,
he said quietly. Draco stared at him impassively. Harry's eyes slid to the window just over Draco's shoulder. He swallowed.
I'm in love with you.
There was a long silence. At length, Harry chanced another look at Draco's face. It was still unreadable, still cold.
I know, but you said you were willing to see me on my terms. Funny, that's the whole reason I decided it might be a good idea.
He cleared his throat.
I told you I didn't want your help,
he said again, though it seemed as though he were speaking more to himself than to Harry.
And I didn't give you any, really. No press, no favours. I was still playing by our rules,
Harry said, distaste turning his tone sour.
This was just me checking to see if McGonagall had a... I wasn't trying to. At least I don't pretend my selfish decisions were deliberate choices I made,
Draco said. He sighed, some of the curbed anger bleeding from his expression. He looked suddenly wary.
I'll sleep in my room tonight. I need to think things over. Excuse me. You're in love with me too.
Harry sat, clenching his jaw. Draco skirted around him to head to the door, did not refuse to turn under his hand until he gave a low growl. It loosened, and the corner of Draco's mouth quirked up in a humorless smile. He glanced back at Harry.
So?
He asked, and then he was gone. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Claiming of Grimmauld Place by bixgirl1. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.